The high canopy of the ancient forest was a vast, rustling sea of green, gold, and amber. In the heart of this quiet woodland, where the old-growth trees stood like silent guardians of the earth, lived Barnaby. Barnaby was a very large, very gentle grizzly bear. His thick fur was the color of warm forest honey, shot through with threads of dark cocoa and soft gold that shimmered when the afternoon light filtered through the branches. On his chest, he bore a distinct, cream-colored patch shaped like a crescent moon, a mark that seemed to match the quiet night sky he loved so much. Around his neck, he wore a simple, hand-knitted forest green scarf, a cozy gift from a friend that he kept snug and secure against the autumn chill. Barnaby was a bear who appreciated the simple pleasures of life, the cool touch of damp moss under his paws, the sweet taste of wild blackberries, and the peaceful hush that settled over the valley when the sun dipped below the blue-gray mountains. As the days began to grow shorter and the morning air took on a crisp, sharp edge, Barnaby felt a familiar, gentle weight settling behind his eyes. It was late autumn, the time of year when the earth itself seemed to slow its heartbeat and prepare for a deep, quiet rest. The vibrant green leaves of summer had turned into brilliant hues of crimson and gold, dancing lazily to the ground with every passing breeze. Barnaby walked slowly along the familiar winding paths of his forest home, his heavy paws making a soft, rhythmic crunching sound against the carpet of dry leaves. He looked up at the sky, noticing how the bright, clear blue of summer had softened into a pale, sleepy violet. High above, flock after flock of wild geese flew in perfect wedges, their distant, musical calls echoing through the quiet air as they journeyed toward the warm south. The forest was preparing to sleep, and Barnaby knew it was time for him to prepare as well. He stopped beside a crystalline creek that bubbled softly over smooth, gray stones, sending a gentle, soothing sound into the cool air. Barnaby dipped a heavy paw into the cold water, watching the ripples spread and disappear into the quiet pool. He felt a deep, comforting connection to the changing season, a quiet understanding that rest was a natural, beautiful part of the world's rhythm. He took a long, deep breath, filling his chest with the scent of damp earth, fallen pine needles, and the faint, sweet aroma of late-blooming wildflowers. The world was winding down, and the promise of a long, peaceful sleep was a welcoming thought that filled him with a sense of quiet contentment. He stood by the water for a long time, simply listening to the gentle murmur of the creek and watching the golden leaves drift like tiny boats down the current. Barnaby walked further up the sloping hill, where the pine trees grew thicker and the air was filled with the clean, sharp scent of evergreen. He was searching for the perfect winter den, a place where he could tuck himself away from the cold winds and the heavy winter snows. He wanted a sanctuary that was safe, warm, and deeply quiet. He climbed higher, his steps slow and deliberate, enjoying the peaceful solitude of the mountainside. He examined several hollow logs and shallow rock overhangs, but none of them felt quite right. Some were too exposed to the wind, while others were too close to the busy trails of the lower forest. Barnaby was patient. He knew that the right home would reveal itself when the time was right. Near the crest of the hill, hidden behind a thick curtain of ancient ivy and the tangled, mossy roots of a giant oak tree, Barnaby discovered a narrow opening in the gray stone of the hillside. He stepped closer, his nose twitching as he caught the scent of dry, sheltered earth. He carefully parted the ivy vines and squeezed inside. The cave was perfect. It was spacious but cozy, with a high, arched ceiling of solid stone that would protect him from any storm. The floor was dry, dusty earth, shielded from the dampness of the outside world. The entrance faced away from the prevailing winter winds, ensuring that only the softest drafts would reach him. Barnaby turned in a slow circle, feeling the immediate sense of safety and quiet that filled the stone chamber. This would be his den, his sanctuary for the long winter months. With his winter home selected, Barnaby set about the task of making it warm and comfortable. He knew that a good winter's sleep required a bed of the softest, most insulating materials the forest could provide. He walked back down the hill to a damp glade where the green moss grew in thick, plush carpets over the fallen logs. Barnaby gently gathered handfuls of the damp moss, careful not to disturb the earth beneath, and carried it back up the hill. He laid the moss in a thick circle in the center of his cave, creating a soft, green foundation for his bed. Next, he searched for dry oak and maple leaves, selecting only the flattest, driest ones that had fallen in the sheltered hollows. He piled these high on top of the moss, creating a fluffy, insulating barrier. He added handfuls of fragrant pine needles, which smelled of clean forest air and would keep his den smelling fresh and sweet. Finally, he gathered soft, dry ferns that had withered in the autumn cold, layering them over the top like a delicate, warm blanket. Barnaby stepped back and looked at his work, highly satisfied with the thick, inviting nest he had created. He climbed onto the bed and lay down, testing its softness. The moss cushioned his heavy frame, the dry leaves crackled softly beneath him, and the scent of pine and earth enveloped him like a familiar hug. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the deep pull of sleep, but he knew there were still a few things left to do before he could finally rest. Barnaby knew he needed to fill his belly with the last sweet offerings of the year to sustain him through the cold months. He left his cave and walked to the sunny southern slopes, where the wild berry bushes grew in dense patches. Most of the berries had already fallen or been eaten, but Barnaby knew where to look. He found a hidden hollow where the late-season blackberries still hung thick and heavy on the thorny canes. They were dark, plump, and bursting with sweet, concentrated juice. Barnaby ate slowly, enjoying the rich flavor of the berries, tasting the very essence of summer in every bite. He moved from bush to bush, his paws purpled with juice, feeling the pleasant fullness warming his stomach. After satisfying his craving for berries, Barnaby walked to a grove of ancient maple trees, hoping to find one last treat. He knew of a hollow tree where a colony of wild bees had built their hive high above the ground. He climbed the rough bark of the tree, his strong claws finding easy purchase, until he reached the opening of the hive. The bees were sleepy and slow in the cool autumn air, buzzing lazily around the honeycombs. Barnaby reached in carefully, taking only a small portion of the rich, golden honey, leaving plenty for the bees to survive the winter. He sat on a thick branch and licked the sweet, sticky honey from his paws, closing his eyes in sheer delight. The warmth of the honey filled him with a deep, comforting energy, the perfect final meal before his long slumber. As Barnaby climbed down the tree, he heard a rustling sound in the dry leaves nearby. A tiny red squirrel with a wonderfully fluffy tail and bright, inquisitive black eyes scampered out from behind a fallen log. It was Pip, one of Barnaby's closest forest friends. Pip was carrying a large, brown acorn in his mouth, his cheeks bulging with other treasures he had gathered. He dropped the acorn and looked up at the giant bear, his tail twitching with excitement. Barnaby sat down in the leaves, adjusting his green scarf, and offered a warm, sleepy smile. The little squirrel chattered softly, telling Barnaby about the impressive oak tree he had found near the river, filled with the finest acorns of the season. Barnaby listened patiently, his low, rumbling voice responding with gentle grunts of approval. They sat together in the fading afternoon light, the giant bear and the tiny squirrel, sharing a quiet moment of friendship. Pip explained how he was working hard to fill his various hidden winter pantries, ensuring he would have plenty to eat when the snow covered the ground. Barnaby admired Pip's industrious nature, while Pip always marveled at the bear's calm, peaceful presence. After a long conversation, Pip picked up his acorn and scampered up a nearby pine tree, calling out a cheerful goodnight to his friend. Barnaby watched him go, feeling a warm glow of affection for the small creature. The forest was full of life, even as it prepared for sleep, and Barnaby felt grateful for the companions who shared his home. The shadows were lengthening, stretching long and blue across the forest floor, as Barnaby made his way back up the hill. The sun was dipping lower, painting the sky in soft shades of orange, rose, and pale gold. As he approached the entrance to his cave, a silent shape glided down from the branches of a tall spruce tree. It was Fiona, the wise barn owl. Her silver-white feathers were soft and silent, and her large, round yellow eyes blinked slowly in the gathering twilight. She landed gracefully on a low branch near Barnaby's den, turning her head in that slow, mesmerizing way only owls can. Barnaby stopped and bowed his head in a silent greeting, his green scarf catching the last warm rays of the setting sun. Fiona spoke in a low, soothing hoot, her voice like the soft whisper of the wind through the pines. She asked Barnaby if he was ready for his long journey into dreams. Barnaby nodded slowly, his heavy eyelids drooping. He told her that his den was prepared, his bed was soft, and his belly was full. Fiona smiled a gentle owl smile, promising to keep watch over the forest while he slept, ensuring that the winter silence remained undisturbed. They shared a quiet, respectful moment, two creatures of the forest acknowledging the natural cycle of the seasons. Fiona spread her wide, silent wings and drifted up into the darkening sky, a beautiful, silver shadow against the first evening stars. Barnaby watched her disappear into the twilight, feeling a deep sense of peace. He turned and walked into the dark, quiet sanctuary of his cave. The air inside was cool and still, insulated from the outside world. He climbed onto his bed of moss and leaves, turning around 3 times to settle himself into the perfect position. He curled his massive body into a tight, warm ball, bringing his paws close to his chest and tucking his snout under his heavy, furry arm. The green scarf was wrapped snugly around his neck, keeping out any stray drafts. He took a long, deep breath, letting the clean, earthy scents fill his mind, and exhaled slowly, letting go of the last lingering thoughts of the active seasons. Outside the cave, the first delicate snowflakes began to fall from the dark, cloudy sky. They drifted down silently, like tiny white feathers, dusting the ivy leaves and coating the rugged stones of the hillside. The forest grew quiet, the last sounds of autumn muffled by the soft blanket of snow. Inside the cave, Barnaby was warm and secure. He felt the heavy, comfortable blanket of hibernation draping over him, slowing his heartbeat and calming his breathing. His breath became slow, steady, and deep, a soft, rhythmic sigh that rose and fell in the darkness of the den. The outside world faded away, replaced by the warm, cozy darkness of his own inner sanctuary. As Barnaby drifted deeper into sleep, he began to dream. His dreams were not fast or chaotic, but slow, flowing landscapes of color and feeling. He dreamed of the bright, sunny meadows of early summer, where the green grass waved like waves in the wind and the air was thick with the sweet scent of clover. He saw himself walking leisurely through the warm grass, the sun hot on his fur, watching the colorful butterflies dance from flower to flower. He dreamed of the sparkling river where the silver salmon leaped, their scales catching the sunlight like gems. In his dream, he sat by the water, feeling the cool spray on his face, completely content with the beauty of the world. The dream shifted, turning into a gentle autumn afternoon. He was back in the berry patches, but the berries were larger and sweeter than any he had ever tasted. He shared them with Pip and Fiona, their laughter ringing out like soft chimes in the warm air. The dream was comforting, a beautiful tapestry of his favorite forest memories, woven together with the threads of his peaceful sleep. He felt no cold, no hunger, and no worry. He was safe, warm, and deeply rested, his mind drifting through the pleasant summer days of his thoughts. The dream was a cozy shelter, protecting him from the harsh winter winds that howled outside the cave entrance. The winter storm raged outside, the wind whipping through the bare branches of the trees and piling the snow high against the rocks. The forest was transformed into a white, silent wilderness, beautiful but cold and unforgiving. Yet, inside the stone den, the temperature remained stable and warm. The thick layer of moss and leaves beneath Barnaby insulated him from the cold earth, while his own heavy fur and the cozy green scarf kept his body heat contained. His breathing remained slow and steady, a gentle, quiet rhythm that seemed to sync with the very heartbeat of the sleeping mountain. He was completely insulated from the storm, a peaceful island of warmth in a sea of winter cold. Weeks passed, and the winter settled deep into the valley. The days were short and pale, and the nights were long, cold, and filled with brilliant, icy stars. The forest animals had all found their own ways to cope with the cold. Pip was snuggled in his warm nest high in the pine tree, surrounded by his hoard of acorns. Fiona hunted silently in the moonlit fields, her sharp eyes scanning the snow for any sign of movement. And Barnaby slept on, his dreams continuing their slow, peaceful dance. He dreamed of the spring, of the first green shoots pushing through the melting snow, and the warm sun thawing the frozen earth. But he was in no hurry, he knew that the rest was necessary, a time for his body and mind to renew themselves. Barnaby's sleep was a deep, restorative state, a gift of nature that allowed him to emerge strong and healthy when the warm weather returned. He drifted through the silent weeks, his mind filled with the gentle warmth of his dreams. He dreamed of the sweet sap dripping from the maple trees, of the soft spring rain washing the forest clean, and the joyful songs of the returning birds. The dreams were a promise, a reassurance that the cycle would continue and that the warmth would always return. He rested deeply, his body using only the tiniest amount of energy, his heart beating slow and steady, a quiet anchor in the midst of the winter silence. In the deepest part of the winter, when the cold was at its sharpest, Barnaby's dreams became even softer. He dreamed of a quiet, starry night in late summer, when the air was warm and the forest was filled with the soft glow of fireflies. He sat on his favorite hill, watching the tiny lights drift through the trees like fallen stars. The moon was a bright, silver crescent, matching the patch on his chest. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for his life, for his friends, and for the beautiful forest that was his home. The dream was so peaceful, so filled with love and warmth, that a soft, contented sigh escaped his lips, whispering into the dark cave and fading into the quiet night. The wind outside began to soften, the fierce storms giving way to gentler, quieter snowfalls. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the transition. Inside the den, Barnaby's breathing remained a steady, comforting rhythm. He was the very picture of peace, a gentle giant resting in the lap of the earth. His green scarf was a bright spot of color in the dim light of the cave, a symbol of the friendship and warmth that awaited him when he woke. But for now, he was content to remain in the quiet darkness, drifting through the soft landscapes of his dreams, safe from the cold and the wind. As the winter began to wane, the snow on the sunny slopes started to melt, sending tiny trickles of water down the rocks. The air took on a slightly softer edge, and the first hints of spring began to whisper through the trees. But Barnaby's sleep was not yet finished. He remained in his deep hibernation, his body sensing that the time was not yet right. He needed these last weeks of quiet rest to fully prepare for the busy, active months of spring and summer. He drifted through his final dreams, which were now filled with the bright, vibrant colors of spring wildflowers, the sweet taste of early berries, and the warm, welcoming touch of the sun. He dreamed of waking up, of stepping out of his cave and feeling the warm breeze ruffle his fur. He saw himself greeting Pip and Fiona, their voices filled with joy as they welcomed him back. The dream was vivid and beautiful, filling him with a quiet anticipation. But he remained asleep, savoring the final moments of his long nap, enjoying the perfect comfort of his bed. The world could wait, the spring would arrive in its own time, and when it did, Barnaby would be ready. For now, he lay wrapped in his warm fur and green scarf, a peaceful, sleeping bear in a quiet, winter world. The days grew slowly longer, the pale winter sun climbing a little higher in the sky each day. The ice on the creek began to crack and melt, the water flowing once more with a bright, cheerful sound. The birds began to return, their sweet songs filling the morning air with hope. But inside the cave, the silence remained unbroken. Barnaby slept on, his heartbeat a slow, steady pulse, his breathing a soft, rhythmic sigh. He was the heart of the forest, a quiet center of life and warmth in the midst of the changing world. He rested, dreamed, and waited, completely at peace with the rhythm of the earth. The story of Barnaby's long nap was a quiet song of the forest, a reminder of the importance of rest and the beauty of the natural cycles. It was a tale of safety, warmth, and the deep, comforting peace that comes from being in harmony with the world. As the last winter snows melted and the earth prepared to wake, the sleeping bear remained tucked away in his cozy den, his mind filled with the gentle, sunny dreams of spring, his body strong and rested, ready for the new adventures that awaited him. The forest watched over him, the trees stood silent guard, and the stars shone brightly in the night sky, all protecting the gentle giant as he finished his long, peaceful nap. The ancient oaks and pines seemed to whisper to each other, their branches swaying gently in the warming breeze. They spoke of the seasons that had passed and the seasons yet to come, of the snow that was disappearing and the green that was returning. They watched the entrance to Barnaby's cave, knowing that soon, the ivy vines would part and the giant bear would step out into the light. But they were patient, just as Barnaby was. They knew that the best things in life could not be rushed, and that the long, quiet sleep was just as important as the active, sunny days. They stood strong and tall, a comforting presence on the hillside. Down in the valley, the first wildflowers began to bloom, their delicate petals of yellow, blue, and white pushing through the damp earth. They turned their faces toward the sun, soaking in the warmth and adding their own sweet scent to the air. The insects began to wake, their gentle buzzing adding a soft, hummed background to the forest sounds. The world was waking up, but it did so slowly, gently, without hurry. It was a peaceful awakening, a gradual transition from the cold silence of winter to the warm activity of spring. And in his cave, Barnaby felt the first faint stirrings of the changing energy, his dreams becoming lighter and closer to the surface. He dreamed of the sweet, fresh grass he would eat, of the cool mud he would walk in, and the warm sun that would dry his fur. He felt a gentle warmth spreading through his body, his heartbeat speeding up just a fraction, his breathing becoming a little lighter. He was transitioning, slowly and naturally, from the deep sleep of hibernation to the soft awareness of the waking world. But he did not open his eyes yet. He savored the last, cozy moments of his nest, the warmth of his fur, and the comfort of his green scarf. He was in no rush to leave his sanctuary. The light outside the cave grew brighter, the golden rays of the morning sun reaching further into the entrance, illuminating the ivy leaves and casting warm patterns on the stone floor. The scent of spring was stronger now, a mixture of damp earth, fresh green growth, and the sweet aroma of flowers. It drifted into the cave, a gentle invitation to the sleeping bear. Barnaby took a deep, slow breath, his nose twitching as he caught the new scents. He felt the change, knowing that the long nap was coming to its natural end. He stretched his heavy legs slowly, his claws scratching gently against the dry leaves of his bed, a soft rustling sound in the quiet den. He let out a long, low yawn, his mouth opening wide, showing his strong teeth, and then closed it with a soft smack. He rubbed his face with a heavy paw, clearing the last cobwebs of sleep from his eyes. He felt strong, rested, and filled with a quiet energy. The long winter sleep had done its work, restoring his body and mind, preparing him for the active seasons ahead. He lay still for a few more moments, listening to the sounds of the waking forest, the cheerful songs of the birds, and the soft murmur of the melting creek. It was a beautiful symphony, a welcome back to the world. Barnaby sat up slowly, the dry leaves falling from his thick fur like golden confetti. He adjusted his green scarf, patting it into place, and looked around his cozy den. The cave had been a good home, a safe and warm sanctuary through the coldest storms. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the shelter it had provided. He stood up, his legs feeling strong and steady, and walked slowly toward the entrance. He parted the ivy vines with a heavy paw and stepped out onto the rocky ledge, blinking in the bright, warm sunlight. The sun felt wonderful on his fur, a warm, golden caress that chased away the last lingering chill of winter. He took a long, deep breath of the fresh spring air, his chest rising and falling, his eyes scanning the beautiful green valley below. He saw the new leaves budding on the trees, the wildflowers blooming in the meadows, and the sparkling river flowing through the valley. It was a brand new world, fresh, clean, and full of life. Barnaby smiled a wide, happy bear smile, his heart filled with joy. From a branch above, Fiona watched him with her wise yellow eyes, letting out a soft, welcoming hoot. Barnaby looked up and nodded, his heart warming at the sight of his friend. And from the nearby pine tree, Pip scampered down, his tail twitching with excitement as he chattered a loud, cheerful greeting. Barnaby sat down on the warm rock, wrapping his green scarf a little tighter, and welcomed his friends. The long nap was over, the spring had arrived, and Barnaby was ready to enjoy the beautiful forest once more, surrounded by the companions he loved, in the wonderful world that was his home. The three friends sat together on the sunny ledge, sharing their stories of the winter and their plans for the coming spring. Pip talked about the new nut trees he had discovered, while Fiona described the quiet beauty of the snowy nights. Barnaby listened with a happy heart, his low rumble of a voice joining in the conversation, feeling the deep bond of their friendship. It was a perfect beginning to the new season, a warm and gentle transition into the busy, active days of spring. The forest was alive, the sun was bright, and the sleepy bear was finally awake, ready to share in the joy of the beautiful, green world. As the morning progressed, the warmth of the sun grew stronger, melting the last patches of snow in the deep shadows. Barnaby stood up and stretched once more, feeling the full strength of his muscles. He was ready to explore, to walk the paths of his home, to taste the fresh green grass, and to feel the cool earth under his paws. He looked at Pip and Fiona, his eyes shining with affection. They would walk together, exploring the changes that the winter had brought and welcoming the new life that was emerging. The forest was their home, a place of safety, beauty, and friendship, and they were ready to enjoy every moment of the beautiful spring days ahead. They walked slowly down the hillside, the giant bear, the tiny squirrel, and the wise owl, making their way into the green valley. Barnaby's steps were steady and confident, his green scarf fluttering gently in the breeze. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the natural cycle of the seasons would always bring them back to this warm, happy place. The long winter sleep was behind him, a beautiful memory of dreams and warmth, and the bright, sunny days of spring were stretched out before him like a welcoming path. He was ready for the new journey, happy to be awake, and deeply content in the heart of his beloved forest. As they reached the banks of the sparkling river, Barnaby stopped to take a drink, the cool, clear water refreshing and sweet. He looked at his reflection in the quiet pool, seeing the bright crescent on his chest and the green scarf around his neck. He felt like himself, strong, rested, and ready for whatever the new year would bring. He looked up at the sky, seeing the white clouds drifting lazily across the bright blue, and let out a soft, contented grunt. The world was good, the forest was beautiful, and the sleepy bear was home, awake, and deeply, truly happy. The wind rustled through the new leaves of the oak tree, whispering a soft song of welcome to the giant bear. The wildflowers nodded in the breeze, their bright colors dancing in the sunlight. The river flowed on, a bright, cheerful thread of life winding through the valley. It was a day of celebration, a day of new beginnings, and a day of deep gratitude. Barnaby, Pip, and Fiona sat by the water, enjoying the peace and the warmth, their hearts filled with the quiet joy of being together, in the wonderful, sleeping, waking forest that was their home. And so the forest settled into the gentle rhythm of the spring, the memory of the winter cold fading like mist in the morning sun. The trees grew greener, the flowers brighter, and the animal sounds louder and more cheerful. Barnaby walked the paths of his home, a gentle guardian of the woodland, his warm presence a comfort to all who met him. He was a bear who had slept deeply, dreamed beautifully, and woke up ready to embrace the wonders of the new season, a peaceful giant living in harmony with the natural cycles of the earth. The story of the sleepy bear's long nap was told by the birds in the trees, whispered by the wind through the grass, and carried by the river to distant valleys. It was a story of comfort, safety, and the deep, restorative power of rest. It was a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest winter, there is always warmth, always dreams, and always the promise of a beautiful new spring. And in the heart of the quiet woods, Barnaby walked on, his green scarf bright against his honey-colored fur, a happy, peaceful bear in a wonderful, waking world. The afternoon sun was warm and golden, casting soft, long shadows through the trees. Barnaby lay down in a patch of soft green grass, his head resting on a mossy log, his eyes closing slowly as he listened to the soothing sound of the river. He was not going back to sleep, just enjoying a quiet moment of rest after his morning walk. Pip sat on the branch above, nibbling on a fresh bud, and Fiona napped quietly in the shade of a hollow tree. The forest was peaceful, the air was warm, and the sleepy bear was content, drifting in a soft, waking dream of summer days and cool, starry nights. He felt the gentle breeze ruffle his thick fur, carrying the sweet scent of clover and pine. He was filled with a deep, quiet happiness, a feeling that everything was exactly as it should be. The seasons would change, the winter would return, and he would sleep again, but for now, he would enjoy the warmth, the light, and the companionship of his friends. He opened one sleepy eye, saw the green leaves dancing against the blue sky, and let out a soft, happy sigh. He was Barnaby, the gentle bear, and he was home, awake, and very, very peaceful. The shadow of the mountain slowly covered the valley, bringing a cool, gentle dusk to the forest. Barnaby stood up and shook his fur, the last dry leaves of his winter bed falling away. He turned back toward the hill, walking slowly up the path toward his cave. He would sleep there again tonight, but it would not be the deep sleep of hibernation, just the cozy, restful sleep of a spring night. He looked forward to the comfort of his bed, the scent of the moss and leaves, and the quiet safety of the stone walls. He reached the entrance to his den, the ivy leaves dark in the twilight. He looked back at the valley one last time, seeing the first fireflies beginning to blink in the meadows and the stars emerging in the dark sky. He felt the familiar, comforting peace settling over him, the quiet hush of the night. He stepped inside, curled up on his soft bed, and closed his eyes. The green scarf was soft against his neck, the leaves crackled gently beneath him, and the dark cave was warm and safe. He drifted off to sleep, his breath slow and steady, a peaceful bear in a quiet, sleeping forest.